So I get asked all the time about this whole thing called CAC, Call Admission Control, and whether it's really important or not. Because the system certainly works if you don't administer CAC. And I'm like, yeah, actually CAC is a really big deal. And let me kind of draw a little bit of history into this to find out. Now, let's say I had a T1 going between two locations, two PBXs, for voice, and you say, well, a T1 has typically 24 channels. Again, we could get creative and talk about D channels on an ISDN. Let's just talk vanilla. We're talking 24 channels. And if the next question is, well, what happens if a 25th person attempts to go across that point-to-point T1? What happens to that call? And you say, well, it doesn't happen. It gets blocked. It gets denied. I get busy. I get a reorder. It doesn't go. Perfect. That sounds great. But then the question is, what happens to the first 24 of those phone calls that were already in, they were going across that T1? What happens then? And you say, well, nothing. They work great. There's nothing that happens because of that. Well, that's where we introduce the concept of CAC. Because in the data world, if that's an IP link, I am not actually limited in resources to 24. So you may only have enough bandwidth on your whatever your WAN pipe is. Maybe it's a T1 converted to as a data T, like a PPP T1. Well, now all of a sudden, let's pretend you have only 24 channels worth of bandwidth. And if you run a 25th call over that same amount of bandwidth, what happens? Well, actually, the 25th call is going to go. If you're not doing any kind of call admission control, that 25th call is going to go across that wide area network. And you say, well, what's worse than that is the first 24 phone calls that were already going on over there just got really, really bad. Because what you did was you had the same amount of bandwidth, but you had 25 calls going in a pipe that could only support 24 calls, which means all 25 of those calls are missing 1/25 of their data. Well, again, maybe you could get away with some of that. Maybe it wouldn't be entirely noticeable, but I guarantee at some point the voice quality is going to get bad because you're going to just be spilling dropped packets all over the place. So I have to, in essence, make my data connection, my IP trunk, to have the same functionality as a regular TDM trunk. And so what we do is we limit the number of calls. So I say from point A to point B, I'm going to put a call admission control level of maybe 24 phone calls. That's very tangible. It's a very, people like to think of the number of calls as a limiting factor. The only problem is number of calls only will work if you can guarantee me what the bandwidth of each call is going to be. Well, the problem is in voice over IP, you can't determine that. One of the calls may be going over as a G.711 call. Maybe the next call after that is a G.726 or a G.729 or even a G.723. All of those different calls, all of those different codecs take different amounts of bandwidth. And so what I have to make sure is to say, I have to limit based on the bandwidth. Well, in Avaya Communication Manager, I can do just that. I can say, going between network region, we'll kind of think of that as a location, but in technical terms, we'd call it a network region. Between network region 1 and network region 2, I want to limit it to 1.5 meg. Well, what the system is smart enough to do now is to recognize every time a call is going between either one of those network regions to deduct the amount of bandwidth based on the codec that's being used. So if it is G.711, it'll deduct the bandwidth of a G.711 call. If it's a G.726 call, it will deduct the amount of bandwidth of a G.726. Now, again, it's not actual measured bandwidth, so you got to be careful about that. Because as we know, codecs simply define the amount of the payload. I still have encapsulation overhead on top of all of that. And that's why bandwidth varies, whether it's on an Ethernet link or whether it's on a PPP link, whether it's on a frame relay link, whether it's on an MPLS link. It's always going to be different. So we're going to estimate it. So you have to look through that and make sure it's all going to happen. But call admission control, or CAC, is a very, very powerful tool to make sure that you don't exceed the amount of bandwidth that is actually physically present. Not only that, you got to start looking at the QoS values too to make sure that you're not exceeding the priority queue that's determined on the data network. So this is all about working with your data organization, making sure that the right pieces are in place, understanding the amount of bandwidth on your network, understanding the call flows, and keeping it over there. So call admission control, CAC, check it out.
Hey Dave, how you doing? I have a question that I've been really itching to ask. And I've got this administrator guy, and he always leaves his desk. And he keeps the change command up so nobody else can do anything on the switch. So how do I kick him out?
Kim, I mean, another one from Texas. What is up with this? You'd almost think we film those at the same place. Who knows? Hey, yeah. So you described a problem that we've had forever, right? Only one person can be making a change in Communication Manager at any given time. So if one person's already in, and then a second person is hopping in, and they try to make a change. I mean, multiple people can be doing displays and statusing things, but as soon as you have a change station or a change something, only one person can be in at a time. So it ends up being an actually really easy thing to fix. Of course, it does require kicking the other person out of the system. So, for starters, you have to be okay with that. And you got, oh my gosh, please make sure that they're not actually working on something like some really long vector in the middle of it, and they haven't saved that command or submitted that command. You could get yourself in big trouble. So again, assuming that you know for sure that they're not in this, they're not really there, you just want to kick them out. The first thing you need to do is status logins. So status logins will give you a list of all of the people that are currently logged in. By the way, you do this in the command line of the SAT, or System Administration Terminal. So status logins will give you the list of all the people currently logged in. And over to the right will be a login ID. And it's a number, whatever that number is. So all you have to do is then do a reset login -ID, and you don't have to spell that out. So like reset log is probably all you have to do. And then the login ID number. So reset login 7, if that happens to be the number. And once you do that, it boots them right out. And if they were in the middle of making a change and never submitted it, those changes never happened. So you got to be really careful about this. But again, happens all the time. Somebody starts a command and then walks away. So reset login, check it out.
Okay, so hey, look, oh my God, I'm sitting here at VoiceCon, and who do I run into is the one and only Paul Dunay. Now, Paul,
Yep.
You're a really big deal when it comes to social networking for Avaya. I mean, when I think of, I'm a big Twitter follower. I like to follow people on Twitter, and if you want to follow somebody cool with Avaya, it's Paul. So, Paul, what's your official job? What does it all encompass?
Okay, so my role is kind of unique in the sense that I head services marketing for Avaya, arguably half of the company's revenue, and also social media marketing at the corporate level. And in doing that, how we got that started is we started in the support area in giving good customer support through social channels.
I mean, we're talking customer contacts. People are contacting you about support.
Yeah. And which I feel is a really rich area to build a business case for any social media, right? It has a very good, strong ROI. People who, would defect less, people who are, more profitable, people who get good word of mouth, and people who are willing to pay higher prices because they prefer a good customer experience. It's documented by Forrester and a lot of the research analysts.
But like you said, it started out in services, but you found that it had a more global approach at a corporate level.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, Avaya's got to be mentioned quite a bit. I mean,
We have grown from about 1,000 mentions per week to over 3,000 mentions.
3,000 messages.
Yeah.
That's, again...
Yeah. I know.
You're a pretty big deal.
I'm interested to hear how this week went because we're here at VoiceCon and a lot of good quotes are out there about keynote speeches and sessions and stuff like that.
So I know you're analyzing a lot of that now, but are you going to go back and scrub it even more to see just kind of some of the trending that's going on?
Of course, and we have stuff. We have tools that we use, things like TweetDeck, things like Radiant 6, things like Networked Insights that we lay over that to understand what the trends are, how we are, the sentiment of what we're saying, our share of voice around certain conversations. So definitely going to look at that.
So that brings up a really interesting concept of we talk about customer contacts and how they want to interact with your business, and all of a sudden we're starting to talk social network, and we've talked on the show quite a bit about that, but what are some things that Avaya is doing from a product side that is related to bringing that social networking into the contact center?
Right. So as we've had conversations with some of our clients, right, some of the biggies out there, we've been talking about what we're doing, and people are generally very interested in how we've taken control of social and how we've focused it on certain particular areas, especially customer support. And, it's come up that their volume is higher than our volume, and, some of those volumes are up in the stratosphere of, 30,000 mentions per week. And, that's a problem that companies are going to be facing as they engage more. It's like email. The more email you send out, the more email you get back, right? So it's one of those things where, how are they going to be able to monitor that, pick out the ones that are relevant, and push those into the contact center? So that's a problem that I'm not only trying to solve for myself and for our organization, but for our customers and partners as well.
So, do you have any tips out there for companies that are trying to do? I see a lot of the most elaborate Twitter strategy is you get the poor college intern, that's in marketing just because they're young somehow that somehow connects them with.
They should know exactly what to
say. Yeah. Oh, but and so not the truth, right? I mean,
yeah, common sense is not common, right? I mean that's the upshot of that. I mean, if you think about what's happened with Nestle just this week, as far as their whole Facebook page and their command and control of exactly the way that the brand looks on that page, basically because somebody must have said to some intern, like, make sure no one's messing with our logo and the way that it looks, and what's come out is a pretty serious infraction of what I would call a very good, taking a Facebook presence and driving it right into the dirt.
So now we were talking earlier about some things that you're doing within Avaya to try to organize, because social networking cannot be just from Paul, right? It's your big company. You have a lot of people with a lot of public-facing activities.
Right.
I mean, how do you rein that in? How do you provide guidance?
Yeah, again, I think this is like a stage like email, where only a few people in a company have email, and then everybody got it, right? So we're in that stage where all organizations are like that, and we've grown our social media group to over 100 people. Right, and we provide guidelines, we provide training, I provide a letter, a welcome letter to the group, and we hold weekly meetings.
Don't you provide a sticker too?
And I provide a sticker. We're going for a grassroots movement, right? I want other people to sign up to this. I want them to hear about it and go, hey, I want to be part of that.
Dude, that's great. Hey, Paul, thank you for joining the countdown.
Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to all the tweets that we're going to get on this. Again, we've got a Twitter account. Maybe we can have marketing show it right here.
Yeah.
And send us your feedback. But really appreciate you being here.
Excellent.
And,
ACE. Okay, let's talk a little bit about ACE. ACE is getting all kinds of buzz in our industry. It got a lot within VoiceCon, which, again, for those of you that may not be aware, that has officially changed to Enterprise Connect. But ACE is a product that Avaya acquired from Nortel. It's called the Agile Communications Environment. And what it does is expose functionality. Now, you've heard us talk about this before on the countdown, where it's the same thing that the Application Enablement Server does, AES, for kind of the traditional Avaya architecture. But when it comes to Avaya Aura, ACE gives a whole lot more functionality and flexibility to exposing some of those feature sets. What's cool is it embraces something that Avaya had started a while back called CEBP, and not that is something made up by Avaya, but communication-enabled business processes is a general concept that talks about how do I take the functionality of a system, the core components, and offer them up as individual things that I can do something with. Ultimately, what I'm doing is taking little bits of different products and bringing them together to create my own product. So again, that's when we think of exposed functionality, we're doing that. Well, ACE, the Agile Communications Environment, is really all about making that happen. So this is something that's going to be a really big deal, especially for the DevConnect partners within the Avaya community. Avaya certainly will come out with some of its own products and solutions that are built around that, just like they do today with AES. But we're going to see the DevConnect community really embracing this because it allows access to all of the core Avaya Aura functionality and lets you be real creative with call control, both in voice and video. All kinds of really good stuff. So ACE, really big deal. Check it out. So over the last few years, Avaya is getting very creative in a good way with user interfaces. Starting out with something as simple as the 9600 series phone, drastically changing how we interact with a phone. Well, now we're moving into another environment with like the guest media hub that is geared towards the hospitality or hotels, where you have a completely different user interface for dealing with the telephone, given that particular scenario. So another very creative user interface. Another one that Avaya announced and demoed at VoiceCon was this a product called Web.Alive, acquired from Nortel. Very cool environment that changes how you interact with a conference bridge. Instead of dialing into a number and entering your PIN, you're actually walking in a building as almost like a Second Life kind of avatar. You're walking around, you're walking by conference rooms, you see whiteboards on the wall, you're interacting with it, you're having side conversations with spatial audio. This is real big game changer in the world of user interfaces, so check these things out.